The crystalline spires of New Arcturus Station caught the light of 3 distant suns, sending rainbow fractals dancing across its polished surfaces. Among the elegant aliens who called this place home, a lone figure moved through the shadows of the Grand Promenade, her silvery skin dull and lusterless where it should have sparkled with stored emotional energy. Lyra pressed herself against the cool metal wall as a group of her own kind passed by, their wings shimmering with absorbed emotional essence, their faces turned pointedly away from her presence. The young Sylphid's wings remained close to her back, too weak to lift her into the graceful aerial dances that were her species' pride. Environmental anomaly detected in Sector 7. The station's smooth voice announced overhead. Please maintain appropriate distance. Lyra's shoulders slumped. She didn't need to look up to know that warning was meant for her. The station's sensors always marked her presence as an anomaly, her unique inability to process pure emotional energy registering as a void in their carefully maintained atmospheric harmony. A sleek meridian merchant, their crystalline form refracting light in perfect geometric patterns, quickly rerouted their hover cart away from her path. 2 quantum dancers, their bodies rippling with probability waves, shifted their quantum states to put more space between themselves and the defective Sylphid. The humans will be here soon, a passing station monitor muttered to their companion, their bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with disapproval. They always come to this sector around this time. Best to clear the area. Lyra felt a flutter of hope at those words. The human arrival meant the station's carefully maintained order would give way to their wonderful chaos. Their emotional radiation was different from the pure, refined energies her kind typically fed upon, complex, messy, and somehow more filling. Near them, the constant hunger that gnawed at her core would ease, if only slightly. She made her way to the cargo reception area, each step carefully measured to avoid drawing attention. The grand viewing windows showed the approaching human transport ship, its design practical rather than aesthetic, bearing the marks of countless repairs and modifications that would have horrified the station's other residents. A group of elegant Sylphids noticed her watching the ship. Their wings flared with disgust, emotional energy crackling between them in patterns that spelled out their judgment. She waits for the primitives. How fitting. Lyra's own wings trembled with the effort of holding back tears. She had long since learned that showing emotional distress only made things worse. The station's residents viewed any display of unrefined feelings as proof of her dangerous nature. The docking procedure began, and Lyra felt the subtle shift in the station's atmosphere as the human ship connected. Other aliens quickly cleared the area, their movements precise and efficient in their retreat. The station's environmental systems hummed as they adjusted to compensate for what the others called human emotional contamination. But Lyra knew better. She could feel it already. The warm, complex web of feelings that humans brought with them. Joy tangled with frustration, determination wrapped around worry, and underneath it all, a steady current of curiosity about the universe around them. It wasn't the pure emotional energy her kind was supposed to thrive on, but to her unique biology, it felt like the first rain after a drought. The airlock cycled, and Lyra pressed herself deeper into her hiding spot. She would watch them from afar today, soaking in whatever emotional fragments she could catch. It wasn't enough to properly sustain her. She could feel her strength ebbing with each passing day, but it was all she had. As the human crew began to emerge, their voices carrying through the station's perfect acoustics, Lyra allowed herself a small smile. They might be considered primitive by the station's standards, but to her, they were a reminder that perhaps being different wasn't the same as being wrong. The marketplace's pristine lighting began to swim before Lyra's eyes, colors bleeding together like watercolors in rain. She stumbled, her wing catching on a vendor's display of precision-grown crystal fruits. The merchant, a towering meridian, quickly swept their wares away from her touch, their crystalline form vibrating with alarm. Environmental containment needed in Section 4, the merchant called out, their voice pitched to carry to the station's sensors. Unstable emotional void detected. Lyra tried to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. Her vision tunneled, dark spots dancing at the edges. She had gone too long without proper sustenance, hoping the scattered fragments of human emotional energy would be enough. The station's perfect environmental controls seemed to press in around her, the refined emotional atmosphere as useless to her as vacuum. "Please maintain distance," the station's voice intoned smoothly. "Medical response units have been notified." Through the growing haze, Lyra saw the station's medical team arrive and stop at the prescribed safety distance. Their scanners extended, taking readings, but none moved to help. Their programming was clear. Non-standard conditions required observation and containment, not direct intervention. The last of her strength fled, and Lyra felt herself falling. The polished floor rushed up to meet her, and she closed her eyes, waiting for the impact. It never came. Strong arms caught her instead, radiating a complex burst of concern, determination, and protective instinct that sent a jolt of energy through her failing systems. Lyra's eyes fluttered open to meet a pair of warm brown ones, set in a human face creased with worry. "Hey there, got you," the human said, her voice steady despite the burden of supporting Lyra's weight. "I'm Sarah Chen. You look like you could use a hand." The marketplace erupted in a flurry of alarm signals and warnings. A station monitor rushed forward, their bioluminescent tendrils flashing urgent patterns. "Human Chen, step away from the void anomaly. Your species lacks the sophistication to handle such delicate biological conditions." Sarah's emotional radiation shifted, threading through with something sharp and determined that made Lyra's depleted energy reserves tingle. "What I'm handling is someone who needs help. My unsophisticated scanner says she's suffering from severe energy malnutrition." The human held up a battered handheld device that looked distinctly out of place among the station's sleek technology. Its screen displayed a chaotic mix of readings that would have horrified any station technician with their lack of precision. "Impossible," declared a passing quantum dancer, their probability field fluctuating with certainty. "Our systems maintain perfect emotional energy distribution." "Perfect for everyone except her," Sarah countered, her free hand already pulling a strange device from her cargo handler's vest. She pressed it against Lyra's wrist, and a warm tingle spread through the young sylphid's body. "Emergency stabilizer," Sarah explained softly. "Not exactly standard issue, but we humans like to be prepared." The gathered crowd's horror peaked as Sarah carefully lifted Lyra into her arms. The station monitor's tendrils writhed in distress. The human quarter is not equipped for specialized care. The void anomaly must be contained and studied. "Her name is Lyra," Sarah said firmly, already moving toward the cargo lifts. "And where I come from, we don't contain and study people who need help. We help them." As they moved away from the marketplace, Lyra felt strength returning to her limbs, drawn from the swirling mix of emotions Sarah radiated. The human's determination blazed like a star, wrapped around a core of gentle concern that felt more nourishing than any refined energy she had ever encountered. "Don't worry," Sarah murmured as they entered the cargo lift. "The human quarter might not be fancy, but we know a thing or two about taking care of our own. And right now, that includes you." The human quarter hit Lyra's senses like a symphony after a lifetime of single notes. Gone were the station's perfectly regulated emotional wavelengths, replaced by a tapestry of feelings that swirled and mixed in wonderful chaos. Sarah carried her through corridors where potted plants filled out of their designated spaces, and strings of mismatched lights cast warm pools of illumination. "Welcome to our little corner of organized chaos," Sarah said, navigating past a group of children playing some sort of game with marked tiles on the floor. Their laughter rang out, unbridled and pure, sending sparkles of energy through Lyra's depleted system. They entered what appeared to be a converted cargo bay, now serving as a medical center. Unlike the station's pristine medical facilities, this space was filled with a mix of standard equipment and clearly modified devices. A doctor looked up from her desk, her dark hair streaked with silver, and pulled back in a practical braid. "Sarah Chen, what trouble have you brought me today?" the doctor asked, but her stern tone carried an undercurrent of fond amusement that made Lyra's wings flutter weakly. "Dr. Martinez, this is Lyra. She's suffering from energy malnutrition, but not the standard kind. Her readings are unlike anything I've seen in other sylphids." The doctor's quick, efficient scan was accompanied by a steady stream of emotional radiation that felt like warm sunshine to Lyra's starved senses. Fascinating. Her energy processing system is configured completely differently from typical sylphid patterns. No wonder she couldn't process the station's regulated emissions. "But she responded to my emergency stabilizer," Sarah pointed out, helping Lyra onto an examination bed that had clearly been modified to accommodate various alien physiologies. "Because it's crude by their standards," Dr. Martins replied, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "It produces raw emotional energy, not the refined kind they usually feed on. Sarah, I need you to stay close. Your emotional output seems to be helping her stabilize." Hours passed in a blur of tests and treatments, but unlike the cold observation of station medical units, each scan came with gentle explanations and warm concern. Sarah remained nearby, her presence a steady source of strength. Other humans drifted in and out, each radiating their own unique emotional signatures that Lyra's system eagerly absorbed. "There's nothing wrong with you," Dr. Martinez finally declared, reviewing her results. "Your system is just adapted to process complex emotional spectrums rather than pure wavelengths. In fact, it's remarkably efficient at converting mixed emotional energy into usable power. But all other sylphids need refined energy," Lyra said softly, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "The station's systems are designed around this requirement." "The station's systems," Sarah said with a gentle snort, "are designed around what people think they need, not what they might actually need. Look at this place. We've modified everything to work better for us, not the other way around." As if to prove her point, a small group of cargo handlers burst in, their emotions a delightful tangle of excitement and pride. They carried boxes of what they called comfort food from Earth, sharing stories and laughter that filled the room with nourishing emotional energy. "You should have seen the monitor's face when we told them we were adding a garden to Cargo Bay 4, one handler chuckled, passing around containers of something that smelled wonderfully strange. "They still haven't figured out how we grew those trees in Zero," another added with a wink. Lyra found herself drawn into their circle, her wings gradually spreading as strength returned. Each story, each laugh, each shared moment of frustration or triumph fed her in ways the station's carefully regulated atmosphere never could. She realized that what she had always seen as a flaw might actually be a gift, the ability to thrive on the very complexity that other species try to eliminate. "Welcome home," Sarah said quietly, watching Lyra's wings begin to shimmer with stored energy. "It might not be perfect, but sometimes the best things in life aren't." Sarah's quarters looked nothing like the minimalist spaces Lyra had seen in the station's residential sections. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with physical books, actual paper and binding, their spines worn with use. Holographic displays flickered between star charts and personal messages, while a small garden of earth plants thrived in a modified hydroponic system. "Sorry about the mess," Sarah said, clearing data tablets from a comfortable-looking chair. "I collect information about different species. Call it a hobby, though my superiors call it excessive cultural interest." Lyra's wings shimmered with newfound strength as she absorbed the complex emotional atmosphere. 2 weeks in the human quarter had done more for her health than years of struggling with the station's regulated emissions. "Your superiors don't approve of learning about other species. They think it's unnecessary for a cargo handler," Sarah replied, pulling up a holographic database. "But you never know when understanding someone's culture might help you help them. Speaking of which, there's something I want to show you." The hologram shifted to display ancient text that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. That's old Sylphid script. Where did you get this?" "Found it in a damaged data core we salvaged from an abandoned research station. Most of it was corrupted, but I managed to restore some sections." Sarah's excitement radiated like sunlight. "Look at this part about emotional processing." Lyra leaned forward, her wings spreading unconsciously as she read. The text spoke of ancient sylphid societies, where different emotional processing patterns were not just accepted but celebrated. Some fed on pure joy, others on complex emotional harmonies, and still others, her breath caught, on the mixed emotional spectrums that the modern sylphids considered crude. "There's more," Sarah said softly, scrolling through the text. They called it the spectrum of resonance. Each variation had its purpose, its strength. The ones like you, they were called heart weavers. Heart weavers, Lyra whispered, the term sending tingles through her wings. What happened to them? Sarah's emotional radiation shifted, tinged with sadness. According to these records, about 3,000 years ago, the sylphid leadership decided to optimize their species. They believed processing pure, refined emotional energy was more efficient. Generation by generation, they engineered their population toward a single pattern. But some of us still carry the old patterns, Lyra realized, her mind racing. We're not defective. We're echoes of what we used to be. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Martinez entered, carrying new scan results. "You're going to want to see this," she said, her excitement clear in both her voice and emotional output. "I've been comparing Lyra's energy conversion rates with standard sylphid metrics. Her system processes complex emotional energy 30% more efficiently than the modern optimized pattern." "That's impossible," Lyra protested, even as her wings flickered with hope. The pure energy processing was supposed to be perfect. "Perfect isn't always better," Sarah said, pulling up another section of the ancient text. "Look here. It talks about how heart weavers could stabilize emotional atmospheres, helping different species coexist. They were mediators, healers, connecting those who couldn't connect themselves." Lyra's hands trembled as she touched the holographic text. All her life, she believed she was broken, a mistake to be hidden away. But here was proof that she was something else entirely, a living link to her species' forgotten diversity. "The station authorities won't like this," Dr. Martinez warned, her concern mixing with protective determination. "They've built their whole society around the idea of emotional purity and perfect order." Sarah's emotional radiation flared with that familiar protective strength. "Well, they'll have to deal with it. Because if this database is right, Lyra might be exactly what this station needs, whether they know it or not." The marketplace felt different to Lyra now. Her newly strengthened wings carried her confidently through the same spaces she once haunted like a ghost. The station's refined emotional atmosphere still felt sterile to her senses, but she no longer saw this as her failing. "Environmental anomaly detected," the station's voice announced, as predictable as ever. But this time, a young Meridian merchant didn't pull away. Instead, their crystalline form shifted with curiosity as Lyra approached their stall. "Your crystals," Lyra said softly, noticing something she'd never seen before. "They're growing in spirals." The Meridian's surface rippled with surprise. You can see that. Most just notice they're not growing in standard geometric patterns." Their voice dropped to a whisper. "The growth regulators say it's a flaw in my matrix." "I think they're beautiful," Lyra replied, feeling the merchant's complex emotions, hope tangled with fear, pride wrapped in shame. Without thinking, she extended her wings, letting them filter and reflect these feelings back as something warmer, more harmonious. The Meridian's crystals chimed softly. "How did you do that?" "The emotional atmosphere. It feels clearer somehow." Before Lyra could respond, a commotion drew their attention. A young quantum dancer was having what their kind called a probability crisis, their form flickering between states as they failed to maintain the perfect quantum coherence their society demanded. Station security moved to contain the situation, but Lyra was closer. Acting on instinct, she extended her energy field the way she'd learned in the human quarter, creating a space where the chaotic emotions weren't suppressed, but gently balanced. The young quantum dancer stabilized, their probability waves settling into an unusual but steady pattern. "I can hold this state," they said with wonder. "It's not the prescribed pattern, but it feels right." Word spread through the station's lower levels. The defective sylphid who lived among humans wasn't destroying the emotional harmony as everyone had feared. Instead, she was creating new kinds of harmony, helping others find balance in their own unique patterns. Sarah found Lyra later that day, her emotional signature bright with pride. "You've been busy," she said, watching as a group of young aliens tentatively approached them. "Dr. Martinez's instruments are picking up interesting changes in the station's emotional atmosphere." Hart Weaver, one of the young aliens, a sylphid with barely glowing wings, whispered. "The humans told us what that means. I think I might be like you. The refined emotions, they don't sustain me properly." More came forward. A meridian with asymmetric crystal growth, 2 quantum dancers who resonated at improper frequencies, and several young sylphids whose wings showed the telltale dullness of incompatibility with pure emotional energy. "The human quarter," Lyra began, then paused, looking at Sarah for confirmation. At her friend's encouraging nod, she continued, "The human quarter has space for those who need a different kind of harmony. The humans understand that perfection isn't found in uniformity." "The station authorities won't like this," one of the quantum dancers warned, their form flickering with anxiety. "Let me tell you what my mother used to say," Sarah interjected, her emotional radiation steady and reassuring. "Sometimes the most important changes start with people simply being themselves." As if to underscore her words, Lyra's wings began to shimmer with a new pattern, not the uniform glow of modern sylphids, but a complex dance of colors that reflected the emotional energies around her. The young aliens watched in fascination as she demonstrated how to weave different emotional frequencies together, creating harmonies that the station's automated systems couldn't even detect. "We thought humans were primitive because they couldn't regulate their emotions," the young sylphid said wonderingly. "But they've been teaching you to do something we forgot was possible." "They taught me that different isn't wrong," Lyra corrected gently. "The rest, I think, we'll learn together." The summons came during the station's artificial dawn cycle. 3 senior monitors stood outside the human quarter's main entrance, their bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with official authority. "The Council requires specimen Lyra's presence for immediate pattern reharmonization," the lead monitor announced, their translated voice carrying no emotion. "Our sensors indicate dangerous levels of emotional pattern corruption spreading from this sector." Sarah stepped forward, her cargo handler's vest bristling with modified sensors and emergency equipment. "Lyra isn't a specimen, and she's not corrupting anything. She's helping people find their natural harmonies. Unauthorized emotional modification is prohibited under Station Protocol 447, the monitor replied. "The human quarter has exceeded its designated influence radius. Security units have been dispatched." As if on cue, sleek enforcement drones descended from the upper levels, their containment fields humming. But the human quarter's residents had already begun moving with practiced efficiency, and Lyra suddenly understood why Sarah's people had modified so many systems. The hydroponic garden switched from food production to atmospheric manipulation, releasing a complex mixture that played havoc with the drone sensors. Cargo lift patterns, normally predictable, began shifting randomly as the human technicians activated what they called creative routing protocols. "Last warning," the lead monitor insisted, though their tendrils flickered with uncertainty. "Submit to reharmonization or face station exile." A soft chime from behind made everyone turn. The young Meridian merchant from the marketplace emerged from a seemingly solid wall panel, their spiral crystals gleaming. "You'll have to exile me too, then." "And me," said the quantum dancer, phasing through another hidden passage. More appeared, all those who had found acceptance in the human quarter. "This is highly irregular," the second monitor observed, their tendrils tangling in distress. "The emotional atmosphere is becoming dangerously complex." Lyra spread her wings, no longer hiding their unique shimmer. complex doesn't mean dangerous. Look. She began weaving the swirling emotions into patterns that even the monitor's rigid sensors could understand. Joy and fear, determination and doubt, all flowing together in harmonies that the station's systems had never considered possible. Impossible, the third monitor whispered. The patterns, they're stabilizing themselves. Because that's what heart weavers do, Sarah explained, her voice firm but gentle. Your records are incomplete. Lyra isn't a malfunction. She's a living link to abilities your people once valued. The lead monitor's tendrils writhed in confusion. But the optimization protocols, the perfection standards, were a choice, Lyra finished. One made so long ago that you forgot there were other choices. She gestured to the gathered community. Look at what we can build when we stop forcing everyone into the same pattern. The enforcement drone's containment fields flickered and failed as the emotional harmonies grew too complex for their programming to process. But instead of chaos, the space filled with a sense of balance that made even the monitor's rigid postures soften slightly. The Council will not accept this disruption, the lead monitor warned, but their tendrils had stopped pulsing with authority and now showed hints of curiosity. Then perhaps, Dr. Martins suggested, emerging from her clinic with a database of readings. It's time for the Council to learn what their ancestors knew. That true harmony comes from embracing complexity, not eliminating it. The monitors huddled, their tendrils interweaving as they communicated in their native manner. Finally, the lead monitor turned back. We require time to process these irregular developments. Specimen. Citizen Lyra will remain in the human quarter while we consult historical archives. As the monitors departed, Sarah squeezed Lyra's hand. They'll be back, she warned. I know, Lyra replied, watching her newfound community emerge from their cleverly hidden sanctuaries. But next time, they might come seeking understanding instead of conformity. The Council's consultation of historical archives stretched from days into weeks, but the station's rigid patterns had already begun to shift. In the Grand Promenade, where emotions were once carefully regulated, new harmonies bloomed like wildflowers through cracks in pavement. Watch this, a young sylphid named Mira whispered to her gathered friends. Her wings, once dull like Lyra's had been, now shimmered with subtle patterns as she wove the ambient emotions into something new. Around her, other young sylphids tried to copy the technique, their wings flickering with effort and excitement. The station's automated voice still announced environmental anomalies detected, but now these announcements were met with curiosity rather than fear. Merchants in the marketplace had begun requesting spots near the anomaly zones, finding that their customers were more inclined to linger and browse in areas where emotions flowed freely. Sarah found Lyra in one such zone, teaching a group of young aliens how to recognize and work with different emotional frequencies. The monitors have been watching your sessions, she said, her emotional signature warm with pride. And not just to file reports. Lyra nodded, having noticed the way the monitor's tendrils would shift from official observation patterns to something more like wonder. They're starting to remember, she said softly. The old records are awakening something in them. A commotion near the central lift drew their attention. A group of elder sylphids had emerged from the upper levels, their wings glowing with the pure, refined light that was considered perfect by modern standards. But as they approached the gathering of young learners, their rigid emotional patterns began to waver. The heart song, one of the elders breathed, their wings trembling. I remember. My grandmother used to speak of it, before such talk was discouraged. Their perfect emotional control slipped, revealing layers of long-suppressed feelings that made their wings spark with new colors. More elders came forward, drawn by the complex harmonies that now filled parts of the station. Among them was a senior resonance master, their position marked by elaborate wing decorations. They watched in silence as Lyra demonstrated how to weave different emotional frequencies together. We thought we were perfecting our species, the resonance master finally said, their voice heavy with realization. But we were limiting it instead. The ancient texts speak truth. The heart weavers were not mistakes to be corrected. They were bridges between different ways of being. Young aliens from various species gathered closer, no longer hiding their unique traits. The meridian spiral crystals caught the light, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the walls. Quantum dancers moved in asymmetric but beautiful probability waves. And everywhere, young sylphids were beginning to experiment with different forms of emotional expression. The station's emotional harmonics are changing, Dr. Martins reported, checking her instruments, but not degrading as the council feared. They're becoming more stable, more resilient. It's like watching an ecosystem recover its natural diversity. Sarah smiled, watching as Lyra helped a group of young heart weavers practice their newly discovered abilities. You know what this reminds me of? Earth's old growth forests. Everyone thought perfectly ordered tree farms were more efficient until they realized the wild forests were stronger because of their complexity. The Resonance Master's wings flickered with interest. Perhaps it is time for the Council to remember that harmony does not require uniformity. These patterns your heart weavers create. They preserve stability while allowing for difference. It is not chaos, as we feared, but a more sophisticated form of order. Lyra caught Sarah's eye and smiled. All around them, the station's perfectly regulated atmosphere was coming alive with new possibilities. The change couldn't be stopped now. It was spreading through the station like dawn breaking after a long night, carried on wings that shimmered with colors no one had seen in 3,000 years. 3 months after the confrontation at the human quarter, new Arcturus station hummed with a harmony unlike anything in its recorded history. The council chamber, once a bastion of rigid order, now hosted the first interspecies cultural exchange summit. The station's environmental systems had been recalibrated to recognize and support diverse emotional patterns rather than suppress them. Lyra stood at the podium, her wings shimmering with complex patterns that would have been deemed dangerous mere months ago. The chamber was filled with representatives from every species on the station, including a significant human delegation. The ancient sylphids understood something we had forgotten. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the space. True strength comes not from enforcing a single pattern, but from weaving many patterns into a greater whole. As she spoke, she demonstrated, her wings creating harmonies that rippled through the chamber. Young heart weavers scattered throughout the audience picked up the patterns, adding their own variations until the entire space sang with layered emotional frequencies. Look around you, Sarah added from her place beside Lyra, her cargo handler's vest now bearing the newly created insignia of Cultural Exchange Officer. Every species here once had similar diversity. The Meridian's crystal songs weren't always perfectly geometric. The quantum dancers once celebrated probability variations as art forms. The senior resonance master, now serving as the head of the Reformed Council, rose to speak. Their wings displayed a beautiful blend of traditional and newly rediscovered patterns. We called humans primitive because they couldn't regulate their emotions to our standards. We failed to see that their emotional complexity was not a weakness, but a different kind of strength. Dr. Martinez's latest research appeared on the chamber's holographic displays. The station's emotional atmosphere has stabilized at levels we never thought possible. Complex harmonies support each other, creating resilience through diversity. We're recording a 30% increase in overall emotional energy efficiency. The marketplace, visible through the chamber's grand windows, had been transformed. The once sterile space now featured gardens designed by human botanists working alongside Meridian crystal artists. Young quantum dancers practiced their probability shifts in spaces specifically tuned to support various quantum states. But perhaps the most significant change, Lyra continued, watching a group of young sylphids playing with human children near a fountain, is in how we see ourselves and each other. Every day, more of our people remember or discover abilities we thought were lost. The humans didn't just save me. They helped us remember who we could be. The station's automated voice, reprogrammed to recognize harmony rather than just uniformity, made a new announcement. Enhanced emotional resonance detected. Recommended response. Appreciation. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Another sound that would have once been suppressed as disruptive. Sarah squeezed Lyra's hand as they watched the gathered species mingling freely, their various energy patterns creating natural harmonies that no artificial system could have designed. "You know," Sarah said softly, "when humans first came to this station, everyone expected us to be the disruptive ones. Turns out we just had a different definition of harmony." A young sylphid approached Lyra, her wings showing the distinctive shimmer of a heart weaver. "The human children are teaching us their games," she reported excitedly. "They don't follow regular patterns at all, but somehow they work better that way." Lyra smiled, remembering how she once hid in shadows, ashamed of her difference. Now she stood in full light, her wings creating patterns that helped others shine in their own unique ways. The station had become what its designers never imagined. Not a place of perfect order, but a space where different kinds of order could coexist and strengthen each other. "We thought we were taking in a helpless alien," Sarah mused, watching the vibrant life flowing through the station. "Turns out we were helping everyone find their way home."